Dalton Schultz, college teammate. I'm talking about Caden Smith. He played at Stanford. He's one of those guys that kind of fits that mold that you were talking about. You're talking about the big athletic guy. This guy, he's able to get vertical. He's able to, seam routes against, in a zone coverage, or he's even able to kind of do what Witten did for many years, and that's just find a spot in the zone and sit.
Today's Friday, February 1st. This is the Cowboys Beat with Ari and Conn on CLNS Media. I'm Ari Temkin, Patrick Conn at Draft Cowboys on Twitter. I am at Ari Sports. And since we are in the off season and you are Draft Cowboys, figured in today's podcast we could kind of have some draft questions answered and look ahead to the draft and see what we think would be a good fit for the Cowboys. And I think we could probably focus in on the tight ends, the wide receivers, but we'd be remiss if we didn't start with the biggest news, something that we've been talking about really throughout this offseason, but it finally came to fruition. It's funny because I think there were all these sort of rumors about what the situation was going to be with the Cowboys offensive staff. And then Jerry called up the Bennett Skin Show on 105 through the Fan yesterday and basically spilled the beans. He didn't spell it out, but he basically said Kellen Moore is going to be very involved with the offense. In fact, he might have the ultimate say in the offense, but you'll hear about that soon. And so, it was basically like, I think Jerry just said that Kellen Moore is going to be the offensive coordinator and call plays. And he kind of mentioned that, well, it's a Super Bowl week, and so it seemed as though it would wait till after the Super Bowl. But, I guess the Cowboys brass probably heard the interview and thought, well, at this point we might as well say it because you basically just said exactly what it was that was going to break. So Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator. John Kitna is the quarterback's coach, and Kellen Moore is going to be the play caller as well. Your thoughts, Patrick, on that?
I thought that they might go with a combination play calling between maybe Kellen Morris, maybe a little Doug Nussmeier, maybe even Jason Garrett. Because you're talking about Kellen Moore hasn't called plays. I guess you could say he called plays in the Pro Bowl. But it was something that wasn't shocking, but at the same time there was so much in the air and so much vagueness coming out of the Star in Frisco because we didn't really know what exactly route they were going. I think the interesting thing with this is they're going with a first time play caller in a year that seems that Jason Garrett will be coaching for his job because they're not going to extend him, or at least that's the report that's started circulating yesterday. So it's kind of interesting. You're like, oh, well, okay. So they are going into this year. And maybe that makes a lot of Cowboy fans happy, because most Cowboy fans, I would think, aren't really all that excited about Jason Garrett. It's kind of like it is what it is. So maybe that gives them some hope that, if they can come out and do something this season, great, they extend Garrett. If not, then after a decade in Dallas, decade plus, maybe Jason Garrett is handed his walking papers after the season.
I think most people's response to that is he should have already been fired. Mm-hmm. And I think, kind of the point I made to that is maybe. But I think, as long as Romo was the quarterback, they were kind of tied to they were kind of tied together because Romo was the offensive coordinator. So I'm sure the Cowboys felt like, well, they're not going to bring in a new coach that isn't going to want Tony Romo to change his plays last scrimmage, and the Cowboys obviously didn't want to neuter that. So, I think it's probably pretty reasonable to consider that Garrett was never going to get fired when Romo was here, as long as Romo was here, because it just wouldn't have made sense given what Romo was able to do. And then, you look at the post-Romo era of this team, and you have the 13-3 or whatever 12-4 year it was, and Zeke's rookie year, then 9-7 last year, and another playoffs this year. So, the idea that this should have already happened, maybe what they're referring to is the Romo years. But again, I just don't think the Cowboys were interested in bringing in another coach that would not have really wanted Romo to change plays last scrimmage. So I think, look, Jason Garrett's been with the Cowboys for a long time, and I think, the biggest question is his ability to adapt and evolve. And I mean, I think in some ways the Cowboys are sort of forcing it on him by not giving him the long-term security with the extension, and bringing in Kellen Moore is not even 30, so he's going to be designing the offense and calling the plays. And I think they feel confident that Garrett's the right guy to sort of preside over that. But it's going to be Kellen Moore's offense, I guess, which should be good news. And if it's not, it's going to be more of Garrett, and hard to believe they can be successful under those guidelines.
Yeah, and then obviously you have John Kitna, who has a plethora of experience as a quarterback in this league.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And so you're going to hopefully get some of that. But I also think that they didn't want to make a change because they got not a rookie, but they have a quarterback on his rookie deal going into the final year.
Right.
They've got to make a big decision, a big financial decision on. And I don't think it's a question of if they re-sign Dak, it's to what's that number going to look like. And I honestly believe that the best course of action is to go ahead and extend him now. You talk about the growing salary caps year in and year out. If you go ahead and do that deal now, it just helps you down the road when you're trying to build a team around him. And I know you probably have those same ideas and same thoughts.
Plus, if they do sort of cater the offense to the skill set of the player, what a novel concept, right? But, that's kind of what we've heard. Hey, they didn't necessarily run an offense that was conducive to Dak Prescott, so now they're going to. So, I mean, just that little shift of calling plays, designing the offense to fit Dak, it bears to reason he's going to command a higher salary next offseason because he should be more successful this season, given that the offense will finally be designed to fit him.
Right, and to do that, they've got to put guys around him, that can help out. I mean, they made the ultimate help Dak out move in trading for Amari Cooper. They won't have a first round draft pick this year, but. Right. But that's fine because Amari Cooper came in and he paid dividends almost immediately. Went to the Pro Bowl, had a 1,000-yard season for the third time in his 4 seasons in the NFL. So, I mean, he paid those dividends immediately, and you have to applaud him for doing that. And so but they've got to continue to do that. And whether it's more wide receivers or tight ends or fix the protection. I mean, we obviously know Zeke is Zeke, and so they're fine in that regard. It's more along the lines of the other key positions or skill players on that offense.
Do you have confidence that this team? Do you have confidence that Kellen Moore can install an offense that can really leverage the skill set of these players? Do you have confidence that this is going to work out?
I have confidence that Kellen Moore can do some things little wrinkles that can help this offense. I don't have a ton of confidence in it just for the simple fact that this is his first time as a play caller at any level. I do think that he's going to draw on some of his experience of working with Scott Linehan, but I also think that he's going to draw heavily on what he learned from Chris Peterson
right,
at Boise and some of the things that they did. And, we've talked about using college concepts to help Dak Prescott. And because that system seems to be more conducive to a player of his skill set. So when you talk about a guy like Chris Peterson and the things that he did at Boise, I really think that that's going to help out a lot. You got young guys who played at Boise, offensively. Talk about Cedric Wilson, so maybe that would work out well for them. If he's healthy and he can go, I think Kellen can do enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think without firing Jason Garrett, this is probably the best move for the Cowboys because, there's a lot of unknown with Kellen Moore, and I think in that there's some excitement in that because it just seems like the Cowboys recently have just been all about the known. We know what to expect. We know what Jason Garrett's offense is going to look like. We know what Scott Linehan's offense is going to look like. We know the way those two will mesh. So I feel like there's just Kellen's a wild card here. And the notion of, an innovative offense that's versatile, that sort of molds not just to the skill set of players, as we've sort of labored on, but also is sort of moldable and bendable on a game-by-game basis. To me, the two games that stand out where the Cowboys facing offenses that do that would be the Colts game. Frank Reich and the offense that he was running that was so versatile, so multifaceted. It was built almost to go against certain defenses as opposed to vice versa. And and the Rams. So you wonder if can Kellen design an offense that, these aren't the most complex offenses in the world. I think they're simple. There's just 3 or 4 different ways they line up and then 100 different variations of that. But I think that's what they need, is they need to simplify it in a way that makes it easier for Dak Prescott, but makes it much more difficult to defend because you're not sure which variation of that same formation they're going to run. I think the Cowboys were kind of the opposite before. Their formation kind of said what they were going to run, and there were so many different formations and personnel packages, all different kinds of things and responsibilities, where now what we see is a lot more sort of simple offenses that will do tons of different things across the board. And every formation is the same formation with 100 different variations.
Yeah, and I think some of that, people wanting, Scott Linehan to be like a, Sean McVay. But I think a lot of that has to do with you got to pay attention to details. And I'm not 100% sure that Scott Linehan did that well. And, people that I talked to that covered the Rams back when Linehan was there, people that I talked to that covered the Lions when Linehan was there in the offense. And they all told me the same thing, that if one key player is out, his offense seems to fail. If so, for instance, this year the key player would have been Travis Frederick, and you can say that that offense failed as a whole.
Yeah.
And so, it points to that. But you think about Kellen Moore and everything that we've heard from people that are surround him, everything that I've heard about him, going back to draft people that I talked to about when Kellen Moore was coming out of Boise, they all said the same thing, that this guy's football IQ is through the roof. So it makes me think, if he can have that attention to detail and he's able to use that football IQ, hopefully that creates some opportunities for this team to take a step forward, because as we talked about, we talked about how in 2016 and in 2014 this was a top 5 offense, but if you compare those numbers to now, they're barely top 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
421 points scored by the Cowboys offense in 2016. 421 points scored by the Cowboys offense in 2016, which was 4th in the NFL. That same number, 421, would have been tied for 9th this year. Right.
So, there's this big step forward with everything going on. And I think that one of the things that they have to do, we talk about the tight end position, I don't, and maybe you agree here, I don't think Rico Gathers is back. I didn't see any reason to keep him on the roster, considering they kept him on the roster all season and he didn't do anything.
Right.
He was a blocker.
Yeah. I think the Rico Gathers experiment is over. This was what, year 4 for him? Was that what it was?
I think it was year 3, but I think he was a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a 4-year deal. But regardless, he has another year left on the contract, but I don't know that they actually will bring him back.
Yeah.
Swaim's a free agent. Do they try and re-sign him?
Well, I do. I want to get into this with you in terms of guys available in the draft, because the tight end position, this looks like a really good draft. But first, I'm going to tell you that about Roman. I've been talking about Get Roman now on this podcast for weeks. And look, guys are terrible at taking care of their health, whether it's a knee injury, bad back, or something worse. Guys are usually more comfortable rubbing some dirt on it than seeing a doctor, right? I'm guilty of it myself. Lingering pain, back pain, shoulder pain. It's just so much easier to just forget about it and not deal with it, and as opposed to going to see a doctor or doing something about it. And the same is very true for erectile dysfunction. Studies show 70% of guys who experience ED don't get treated for it. Thankfully, Roman created an easy way to get checked out by a doctor and get it treated for ED online. Roman is a one-stop shop where licensed U.S. physicians can diagnose ED and ship medications right to your door. With Roman, there are no waiting rooms, awkward face-to-face conversations, or uncomfortable trips to the pharmacy. You can handle everything discreetly online online. All you have to do is visit GetRoman.com/CB, fill out a brief medical onboarding chat with a doctor, and get FDA-approved ED meds delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. It's that simple. You can do everything discreetly, see a doctor, talk to a doctor, have FDA-approved ED medications delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. Guys, go online, get checked by the doctor. Erectile dysfunction is a problem that guys don't tackle, but with Roman, it's so easy, too easy. So take care of it now. For a free online visit, go to GetRoman.com/CB. That's GetRoman.com/CB for a free online visit. GetRoman.com/CB. Look, Swaim and Jarwin, I think, did a really good job, but they're just not, these are not the types of tight ends that teams are really using. I mean, I'm a big advocate of go out and find somebody it's a major athlete. I mean, it's not rocket science. Tight ends are wide receivers now. They're not inline blockers at the end of the line of scrimmage. They are guys you line up in the slot over the middle. They take advantage with their athleticism of linebackers and coverage. And that's what I would be trying to do in one of the most important needs for this team this offseason.
Yeah, so let's talk about Dalton Schultz, college teammate. I'm talking about Caden Smith. He played at Stanford. He's one of those guys that kind of fits that mold that you were talking about. You're talking about the big athletic guy. This guy, he's able to get vertical. He's able to, seam routes against, in a zone coverage, or he's even able to kind of do what Witten did for many years, and that's just find a spot in the zone and sit. And so he has that type of production where you think that he can do it, and he's not as good a blocker as maybe Schultz is, but as you said, you need that vertical tight end, that wide receiver who can line up in line, but really he's going out.
What's your grade on him?
I think he's a second, he is in that second, third round grade for me. So he's a day 2 guy, and I've been trying to look, because obviously when you look at the guys like TJ Hawkinson and his teammate, Noah Fant at Iowa, I think those guys are top 30 guys. There's no way Dallas is going to get those guys, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I have done very little work in terms of scouting the draft, but Hawkinson is an absolute monster. He's the guy that I was thinking of, and some people are like, well, he's not even the best tight end on his team. Fant is, but what I've seen from Hawkinson is exactly what I was talking about. I mean, he is so super athletic, and he's a wide receiver.
Well, he is, but he's also a really good blocker. But when you look at when they say, oh, he's not even the best one on his team, well, if you look at Noah Fant, he's more of that Evan Ingram.
Yeah. Right.
Big
blocker.
slot.
Right.
He's a big slot, whereas Hawkinson's more well-rounded, but I know people are going to value Noah Fant higher because of what he can do on the field as a receiver. Not that Hawkinson can't do that, it's just Fant just does it at a higher level.
Let me ask you something kind of crazy.
Okay.
If you're Jerry and you call up the Steelers and say, hey, what about a second-round pick for Antonio Brown? 1, would you do that? And 2, am I crazy? Because then you'd not have a first or a second round pick.
I wouldn't do it. Absolutely not. Not with everything that I've heard about Antonio Brown. As far as, yes, he's an all-world talent on the field. No question. Do I want that headache? We've had enough headaches with David Irving and various other players throughout the year, and it's like, do we need another headache? Especially in a locker room where they're essentially all fighting for their jobs this coming season.
So I don't think it's not even the second round pick thing. It's more just you're not interested in that, in introducing a guy in that locker room like that. He doesn't seem like a Garrett guy.
Absolutely not. And I've heard so many reports about, Tomlin says that he only puts up with him during the week because of what he can do on Sunday. And it's like, I don't, and he's viewed as Tomlin's viewed as this no-nonsense,
right,
kind of coach. And it's like, well, if he's having to deal with these headaches and he doesn't even want them, it's like, why would I want to introduce that into my team, especially when you have these young, impressionable guys. And you're talking about Gallup and Noah Brown and Cedric Wilson. Do I want that kind of headache around my young guys who I'm trying to get to play and and to buy in to what we're doing here, and then you bring in a guy like that. And, that would be really hard for me to say no because I know the talent that he is. I know what he could do for this football team. And you think about Amari on one side and Antonio on the other. I mean, that's just a nightmare for defenses. I don't think they would do that because I don't think, first off, they're not going to pay it. But, and I just think with the needs, I mean, you could talk about, we could do this and make all these matchup problems. Like, fine, great, we could do that. But now you've essentially put holes elsewhere on your team, and you're not going to get any better.
The thing that I've kind of figured out, or for me, this offseason is about going all in, right? And because I think, the Cowboys have been the opposite of what they were in the early 2000s when they were just, I mean, reckless with the salary cap and money and handing out bad contracts. But they overcorrected, and it just seems like, and this sort of speaks to my argument about Dak Prescott, whether to pay him or extend him this offseason or not. They didn't really take advantage of the fact that Dak Prescott was on such a cheap contract, and now if you pay him, $20 to $25 million a year, you're talking about a significant percentage of your salary cap, which hurts you in other areas. So I'm almost part of the camp that says don't pay him yet so you can take advantage of the final year of his rookie deal and go out and spend some money. Go make decisions that may hurt you long term, but that put you in position to win a championship. Because, I think, yes, going all in is reckless and not necessarily great long term. But I also think if you're a Cowboys fan, it's been 23 years since they played for an NFC title. Like, I'm happy with being reckless and not having the best decisions long term if it gets me to where I want to go tomorrow. And that's how I would feel as a Cowboy fan. I look at the Rams, I look at teams every year that go out and spend money in free agency. They go all in to a certain degree. And it's not the best move. It's not the most fiscally responsible thing to do. It's not the best long-term move, but it's building a championship roster, Patrick, is about, drafting well, developing well, making the right decisions on those guys in terms of second contracts, and then infusing competition and quality players through free agency, through areas and positions that you have not been able to fulfill through the draft.
Yeah, but if you're Jason Garrett, you should want to be reckless.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're like, well, I could lose my job. What do I care about the future?
Right. Which is crazy because that's like reckless is not exactly a word I would use to describe Jason Garrett ever.
Well, no, he's risk averse.
But I'm like, go get Earl Thomas. He's 30. He hasn't played in 16 games in 3 years, but he's the best safety in football when he's healthy, and he's a ball hawking safety, the likes of which the Cowboys don't have. They can't create turnovers. Go get a guy that gets you turnovers. Is it a good move long term? No, it's a bad move long term, but I don't care. Like that's the kind of move that I'm like, at this point, get the move that gets you over the hump next year, because this has been the approach they've taken. They took the opposite approach. That didn't work. They've taken this approach. That's not working. And you start to see sort of what does work. And like the Rams, there was a rumor that the Rams were involved in the Khalil Mack trade market, which that was a rumor that came out, while it was going on. And the story that came out about that was basically that, they offered a first and a third for Khalil Mack with the intention of potentially then trading, signing him long term and then trading him to try to recoup some of the assets. And you think about going after Mack, signing Sue, Peters, Talib, these are the kinds of things where it's like you look at teams that are going all in, and look, the Super Bowl Sunday, who knows if they're going to win, but getting there, being in position, you just kind of have to take some risks at some point, and it's not necessarily the best long-term play, but if you're a Cowboy fan, you have to be sick and tired of the idea of a long-term play. You want to finally take a risk and go do things that could get you over the hump.
They've been doing the long-term thing for the last 24 years. No, they really haven't. They did take some chances, but it didn't work.
Right. That approach didn't work, but that was also it was just Jerry making bad decisions. So
it's like if you try to compare it, like the Rams are, they go after Sue and they get all these different guys. They trade for Fowler and, all these different things that they did. But at the same time, they're really good about drafting too, because they have Gurley and Goff and some of these other guys. So it's like,
Cowboys?
Oh, right. But the Cowboys aren't doing those free agent deals is what I was saying. It's like Dallas is doing half of that. They're drafting good. I mean, they made the trade for Amari. Don't get me wrong, it was a great trade. But it's like
that's the one move they've done outside the organization since signing Brandon Carr.
Yeah, which was terrible.
Which was bad. But I mean, they basically have not gone outside the organization since, I mean, at all. So,
right.
Seems like you're kind of on board with that too. The idea of, hey, maybe take some chances in this offseason. Maybe go and sign Earl Thomas to a contract, even if it's not the best move long term. And seems like you're kind of on board with that too.
Well, yeah, because I mean, outside of covering the Cowboys, I mean, I'm a fan just like everybody else, and I'm tired of, well, there's always next year. Well, there's always next year. Now forget next year. Let's do it now. You know, I agree. Go get Earl Thomas. I have no problems with going and getting him. You know, Gerald McCoy, you know, there's rumors that he was going to be available. Well, if that's the case, go get him.
Yep.
Cowboys need help on the interior. And I know people are like, well, they got Antoine Woods. I'm like, great.
Well,
they
but
need
Woods
more
is
than
a
one
free
guy.
and Woods is a free agent, and he's probably going to want to get paid.
Right, and he deservedly so.
Yeah.
The way he played. You know, but Dallas has got to figure out a way to get interior pressure.
Yeah.
And, you know, I like Malik Collins, but the guy can't stay healthy.
Nope. He can't.
David Irving couldn't stay in the locker room. You know, it's like every time that they felt like they had somebody on the interior, he would disappear. Yeah. But I watched Gerald McCoy. Great player. I think he would do wonders here. You know, put him with Rod Marinelli, working with him. I think he would do good in that system. He would be able to create pressure. And then obviously, if they have an opportunity on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's, you know, a Jesse James from Pittsburgh, tight end, go get him.
Well, that was kind of, I guess, that was what my wonder was, is it's obvious, you know, we both agree they have to upgrade the tight end position, get somebody that's more athletic, takes advantage of kind of the modern NFL. But to me, that's where this is a draft seemingly loaded with tight ends. Like, that's where I'm okay, you know, dipping into the draft, you know, in that vein. I mean, who are some of the other guys? I mean, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but who are some of the other guys you like, especially guys that you think will slip past the first round, where the Cowboys might be available to draft these guys?
Dawson Knox out of Ole Miss. I mean, that he played in a loaded wide receiver group. You know, as far as the offense flowed a lot more towards them. So when you look at his productivity this last season, he only had 15 receptions, but it was almost 19 yards a pop. So, I mean, he's getting big plays. He doesn't score touchdowns because of that offense.
What did you like about him?
I love the fact that he can be really vertical. You know, you talk about the thing that you'll look at when you watch him is his contested catching, and he does that pretty consistently. So you can throw it up to him, which is, you know, huge, because you throw it up, you're expecting your guy to go get it.
Yep.
Yeah, he can block a little bit, you know. So I mean, there's definitely that. You know, he's going to create separation, so that's good for Dak Prescott. He needs a guy like that. Like I said, his blocking can use some work, but you have to like that. A term that one of my buddies, Keith Mullins, always like to say is he wins getting off the bus, and that just means that he has the look, the size, and that's the one thing that you really got to like about him. You know, there's going to be a lot of questions as far as his route running is concerned, but you know, obviously those are coachable things. You know, it was just, I think the system that he played in at Ole Miss just wasn't conducive to his skill set. You know, and you hear that a lot in college. But you know, it was just one of those things that you look at. There's, you know, the possibility of like an Irv Smith. I don't know that he's going to last that long.
From Alabama,
but he's from Alabama, so obviously there's some ties there between Saban and Garrett. You know, he can get a lot of insight on him. You know, so he's another guy that maybe you could possibly get. I mean, I know I want the guys that I want, or the guys from Iowa. That's just not happening. But when you look at Irv, I mean, he's only a tad bit smaller than Knox, but his like productivity. I mean, you talk about his sophomore year, he had 14 receptions for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. Okay, so But this last season, he had 44 receptions for like 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's good productivity, even at the college level. And you know they run a pro-style offense, so it's not like it's going to be that hard for him. His route running is good. I think, when you really look at him, though, he's a little limited in his catch radius. So you're going to have to get the ball close to him. It's not going to be stretched out. He's not going to kill people deep, but this guy can block. And so that is going to raise his grade, I think, within the team. So I think, like, if you talk about Irv Smith, he's going to be a guy that's going to be higher up on the list for the Cowboys than they would the other guys. Why? Because he can block, and he's an elite blocker. I mean, if you're going to play in Alabama, you better be able to block.
Yep.
So kind of the things that he can do is, yards after the catch. He can make contested catches, but just with the offense that he played in, he didn't really get those opportunities. So that's something that's kind of a big question mark on him. He's never asked to, really pass protect, so you're not going to really have to worry about that. But you like his size, you like his route running, you like his blocking. There's some question marks as far as the catching, as far as the contested stuff. So it's a little bit up in the air, but I think that he's going to be higher up there just for the simple fact that he's multifaceted, as you like to say, with I can block, I can catch the ball, I can get loose and create problems. He's a guy who can get up the seam, which is, we saw Jarwin do that a little bit. If they could have a guy that could do that consistently, I think that's going to help Dak. It's going to help, if Cole Beasley returns, it's going to help him out, because I think that kind of clears out some of that area, that short underneath area that Cole Beasley or another slot receiver will likely be in, maybe a little more Zeke there. So, he's a guy. So, out of these three guys, if I had to rank them, I would probably go Irv Smith first, then Dawson Knox, and then Caden Smith.
Well, plenty more on the draft leading up to it with our draft expert, Patrick Conn, on Twitter at Draft Cowboys. Make sure to read all of his great work for WFAA. I'm Ari Temkin. You could catch me streaming live every day, 12 o'clock at facebook.com/watchphantom. That's 12 o'clock noon Central Time, facebook.com/watchphantom. For Patrick Conn, I'm Ari Temkin. The Cowboys beat is out for this week and back next week. Awesome.